everybody, welcome to Handing the Shame Back. My absolute pleasure and honour to bring this to you. My name's Gloria Masters, and for those who are new to the channel, I welcome you on board. Every week we have a survivor who is interviewed by me, and we talk about lots of things that are pertinent to that. Trigger warning: whenever these shows are released, it's really important that you look after yourselves watching this. If you feel at all triggered, please stop watching. Go to the show notes below where you'll be directed for help and some resource. So in the meantime, my absolute pleasure to welcome to the show Jane Epstein. Jane comes to us. She is a TEDx speaker. It was fantastic, Jane. She's also one of 5 co-founders of 5 Waves, which is an organisation that raises awareness globally around sibling sexual abuse and provides much in their space. And I know she's going to talk to you about that. And finally, she's a very passionate advocate, and we're lucky to have her in our survivor community. So welcome to you, Jane.
Thank you so much for having me today, Gloria.
Oh, well, we finally got there. We were trying to juggle, weren't we, calendars and things, but it's great. So welcome. I guess as we start the show today, I'm looking at, I realise what you're doing out in the world, but as we start at the beginning, usually just your comfort level and your experience as a child through child sexual abuse. What are you comfortable to share with us?
I can give you my story in about 2 minutes. I'll give you the short version and we can dive a little deeper. My story started out of order, but I didn't understand that it started out of order. I found myself around age 45 very depressed, and I couldn't figure out why. And I'd been marriage counseling for 5 years with my now husband, and I thought, well, maybe there's something inside of me, because I tried to fix him. It wasn't working. I was still incredibly very unhappy. And I just got this tugging in my heart that there was something inside of me that needed answers, that needed to, I needed to go through everything. So I sat down and I started writing my story from the beginning through my current marriage. And it was there that I discovered that I had been sexually traumatized, sexually abused by an older sibling. And I always knew that. It was always in the back of my head. But I had told myself that I was complicit, and then it was just 2 kids being curious, and I had no reason to be messed up over it. It wasn't that big of a deal, even though it had gone on and off for 6 years. And it also felt like I need to protect my family. I need to protect my sibling. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt their family. But when I sat down and I really looked at it, I thought, okay, this changed me. It changed the way I looked at myself. It changed the way I viewed relationships, and it changed the trajectory of my life. And it was there that I started finding the answers. And that's when I told my now husband what had happened to me. And he was really, really supportive of me. So that's the simple version of my story.
No, that's great. May I ask how old you were when this all began for you?
I believe I was around 5.5 or 6 years old, and my sibling was 12, so 6 years older than me.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That would have been quite a challenge to come to terms with, I imagine, when at 43 the reality hit. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in that space? Were there kind of flashbacks that hit you? Were you being triggered? What kind of brought this up?
Sure. I can go back, looking back now. At the time, I didn't understand it, but I had been married previously, and I was trying to sabotage that marriage. I was trying to pull away. I was telling myself that I was being controlled, when ultimately I wasn't known because I'd never shared about my sibling sexual trauma. And I was keeping that hidden, and I was keeping myself, my true self, hidden. And I didn't feel worthy of love. So I was trying to sabotage that marriage, not knowing it. I don't know where that marriage would have gone because I was starting to really push hard, and he was trying to be, where are you going? Why are you pushing me away? What's going on? And that's when we just discovered that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So whatever I was going through, I had to put that to the side and support him and go through that with him. At the time, I didn't fully understand it, but I was deeply, deeply hurt. I was suffering severe grief because this man had rescued me, and I don't have any complaints about that. I don't have any embarrassment about saying he rescued me. We can go into how he rescued me. But I also felt joy. And I believe it's because the deep, deep grief, the deep, deep pain, I was forced to feel. And I was alive probably for the first time in a very long time. So looking back, I had that. And then I got remarried thinking everything's okay, had 2 children. And I think with a lot of survivors, when we have children and you get married, the memories start coming back.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes. So something happened in my now marriage, my current marriage, and I can just describe it as my eyes just kind of popping open and thinking, what was that? And having a memory placed that would not go away. And I woke up the next morning feeling very angry. And I think I just built upon that. I had 2 small children. I had this memory placed. I couldn't share it. And I just kept pushing it aside and pushing it aside. But there were just too many triggers, too many that were building, and they would not go away. They would not go back in their box like they always had before. So that's when I found myself incredibly depressed. And I realized that no, I have to face something inside of me.
How frightening for you, Jane, and for survivors watching out there. You may have recognized that or be experiencing that yourself. A memory, perhaps the same memory, Jane, kept popping up. And yeah, look, when the mind is ready to deal, fortunately, but unfortunately, if it's frightening, which we understand, it's time to do so, to face it. So how did you take that first step? Because obviously you're a mum, obviously you're being triggered. What did you then do with that?
Wow. I think like a lot of survivors, my healing has not been linear. It's been it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back,
Yeah.
sideways, zigzag, and constantly searching for the finish line. And that finish line kept moving, keeping, oh, I'm almost there, I'm almost there, and it would move. And so I think a lot of survivors can relate to that. So I can give it to you the best way I can, but my memory tries to put it in order when really there wasn't an order.
Yeah.
um, the memory had been placed, and I had 2 small children, and I became incredibly volatile. I was depressed, but I did not know that I was depressed because I told myself, hey, I buried my first husband. I got through that. I can do anything. I'm not depressed. I was depressed. Um, I found myself wanting to be diagnosed with an illness. I found myself wanting to die. I think it was very different from being suicidal. I wanted to die, but I don't think I was suicidal at that point in my life. I just want to make that distinction.
What would you say is that distinction? Just asking for some clarification.
Sure.
So not
As
wanting to be here, but
Yeah, I just wanted to be taken off this earth, but I had 2 small children, and I didn't want to leave them, and something inside of me apparently still wanted to live and fight because I'm still here. Um, I had battled deep, deep depression, and in high school, I had um, attempted uh, to die by suicide, but I'm not sure how serious it was, as opposed to was it just a cry for help. So I don't know that I've ever been suicidal, wanting to die by natural causes or in a car accident. I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes more sense. I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
sense or
I
not.
think well, no, I like that distinction, and thank you for that, because that's I suspect suicide ideation, thinking about not being around, but yeah, you're not necessarily looking to do it yourself, but you're thinking about it. But
Right.
gosh, that's powerful. And so you had two small children. Thank heavens you're with us, Jane.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I hung in there, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful that my husband stuck with me because I tried to sabotage this marriage as well. And he wasn't going to back down. He was going to support me. And I think, once I realized I was depressed, and he knew I was depressed, or a therapist knew I was depressed, but when I finally came and said, I need help, I think they were both relieved. And when I started writing my story down and realizing what had happened, I was able to go back and recall that when I was about 21, my sibling had said to me, I'm sorry for what I did to you when you were little. Now, when he said that, I was not at all prepared for it. And I said to him, it's okay. I participated. And I took that apology and I put it in my back pocket. I'm grateful for that apology because I think somewhere along the line, I knew it was there, and I knew that he wasn't living his best life thinking he hadn't done anything. In my mind, I knew he knew something had gone wrong, and I had brushed it off. But then the anger and the resentment and the depression built up. And so then I was able to be angry at my sibling. I was angry at my sibling's family, and I put them all in a box. And it was at that point when I started writing that I realized what had really happened, and I got angry. And I started Googling sibling sexual abuse, and I couldn't find much on it. I could find a couple outdated articles, and it stated how it's really a silent epidemic and it's a real problem. It's very taboo. No one's talking about it. And I thought, well, I can't be the only 6-year-old girl who went through this. And my brother can't be the only 12-year-old boy who went through this. I know that. So I'd remembered that apology. And there were other things that had happened. I kept hearing the word forgiveness. You got to forgive, you got to forgive. And I said, I don't have to do anything. But somewhere along the line, I was able to forgive myself. I put a picture of that little girl on the mirror because I still talk about her in the third person, but I kept thinking, what does she want from me? I don't know her. I don't like her. I'm angry with her. And I had to forgive her for not telling. And I had to forgive her for her body responding. And my body responded, and I enjoyed the touch. And I had to forgive her. So when I was able to forgive her, then I was able to write my sibling a letter of forgiveness. And he was really surprised because in his mind, he thought it was over. He's thinking, I apologized, it's over. So he was kind of taken aback a little bit. I'll
Wow.
continue. I'll just go a little farther. So it was at that point we actually started talking and connecting, and I expressed to him that we need to talk about this and that it's a silent epidemic. And he said, I will support you in however way I can. So we do speak. It's awkward, but we do speak.
Well, Jane, that's there's so many things. My mind's thinking, where do we start? My
I know.
goodness. But so thank you for sharing. I'm so grateful to you for that, because there's so many out there who have experienced some form of sibling sexual abuse, and perhaps put it into a box, as you so aptly put it, and thought it was perhaps all dealt with, only to find that actually, no, it's not. So I guess the thing is, when you consider, that beautiful little girl, that inner child we all have, and the forgiveness part, what do you make of that? That as, survivors of this, it's there's always a part of us that feels we are, perhaps complicit's not the right word, but we carry some measure of, well, it must have been my fault because. What do you think about that when you consider what you went through?
I think I look back at that little girl as an adult. I look back at her at my age now and think, why didn't you say something? Why did you let that happen? But she was 6. She didn't understand. She didn't have the words. She knew something was off. She knew something was wrong and she felt shame, but she didn't understand what it was. And so she reacted in anger. I can't look at her as an adult, and it's hard. But when I look at her as that 6-year-old little girl and give her the grace and love that she deserves, then I was able to forgive her. And I would like to say one thing. I am not telling survivors that you have to forgive in order to heal.
Mm.
I believe it's a very individual journey. So I don't want that to be ever misconstrued.
No, and I really appreciate that you said that. I guess the other thing too that comes to mind as you were talking was grooming. So because your sibling was 6 years older, or 6.5 years older, there was an element of grooming, and there was no way for that little 6-year-old to have really been able to do anything, because this was someone that she loved. So I think sometimes we're not always aware of how powerful this grooming can be, but it is grooming, and I guess that came to mind. The other thing, as you were talking about forgiveness, was it we are no better or worse or less than if we choose not to forgive.
Agreed.
For the beautiful audience watching, when it is your time to face into potentially doing that or not, there is no gold star. It
Mhm.
is, as Jane said, a really personal, powerful choice. And when it is right for you, you may consider it. If that never happens, completely fine too. I think we have to be mindful, don't we, Jane, that sometimes there's this little 3-step method too to managing all of this, and I don't agree. I think it's an individual step-by-step process for everybody, and as you said earlier, it's recovering from this it's not linear and it's not easy, and those two are facts.
Exactly.
It's the best we can do, guys. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't have a step-by-step healing process. I think the way I learned to heal was by accident. And I think I fell into it. And I also think my grief process of losing my first husband, I kept thinking, okay, I'm through year 1. Now I'm going to be okay. No, year 2 was worse. Okay, when I get to year 5, I'll be okay. Or when I get past this, I'll be okay. Or when I get on my first date, I'll be okay. And once I finally realized, oh, wait a second, I'm going to be grieving him for the rest of my life, that this is a process. It changes, it gets better, it gets worse. Once I realized that there wasn't a finish line to my grief process, I was able to apply it to my healing process and realize that there may not be a finish line for me. I'm much, much better, but some people look out to me, and I've received feedback that says, not every survivor has your life. And I have to remind myself that where I am now, but where I've come from, I had to claw myself out too. um, the amount of medical bills, the amount of prescriptions and whatnot. But through my grief process, I learned that it's very individual, like a fingerprint. And I think it's the same thing with survivors healing from trauma. It's very individual. If someone says this worked for me, take little bits and pieces what work and leave those that don't work.
100%. And it's interesting you say that, because what worked for you may not work for me, but what worked for me, one thing might work for you, and there is no right and there is no wrong, as you say. I agree with you. I think it's unique to all of us.
Yeah.
But I think listening to ourselves is key. And you're talking about that self-sabotage as in through your marriage, and then in your second marriage. Can you tell us how you traversed the line from recognizing the self-sabotage to the link, I guess, linking that to the sibling sexual abuse? How did you manage to finally identify that?
That was by accident as well.
Oh,
Because I did try and sabotage this marriage. And I still have a lot of trauma responses within this marriage. But at least now I know what they are. I don't always identify them right away, but I know that they're there. The way that that really happened was when I started writing, I really felt like someone inside of me, there was a little girl inside of me who was going to die if her story didn't get out of her. And that's when I started putting it down on paper.
wow.
My husband's very, very supportive of me. And so he started reading what I'd written. And I had to say, okay, I could share it with him in writing, but I couldn't talk to him about it. And he would say things like, he would have questions, and I would say, no, I can't talk about it. You're just gonna have to read it and sit with it. But through that process, he heard my story and he understood my story, and he still stood with me. And I was known, and I was still cared for and still loved. It was when I was trying to sabotage the marriages because I didn't know me, I didn't own my story. I didn't tell him my story, so he didn't know me, and I was hiding. And I think when we're hiding and hiding in that shame, we're building walls, and we're building walls, we can't love and we can't be loved. So by me taking these walls down ever so carefully and him still loving me, that's how I accidentally, I think, was able to kind of bridge that gap. That wasn't my intention.
No. And so would that link back to an earlier comment, Jane, you made about not feeling worthy?
Yes. I still don't feel worthy. There are still situations where I still don't feel worthy. And
Yeah.
there are still, I would call them, there are still issues within our relationship because of my trauma.
Yeah. And I think, just to give everyone, including you, Jane, some wonderful hope here. I think till the day we die, we're going to keep learning and growing, and there's going to be some wonderful outcomes, I have no doubt, for all of our beautiful survivors watching. It's just a matter of one little step at a time.
Yes.
And some days, I guess, Jane, it felt like an hour at a time, and some days it felt like a minute.
Exactly.
Depending on where you were at.
Yes.
So, for you, I saw your wonderful TEDx talk. Thank you so much for your courage in doing that. It was really motivating, actually, and I loved your rawness and your realness. And it was so lovely to see the true depths. Are you able to tell our audience or share with them a little synopsis of what your TEDx talk was about?
Wow. It's one of those things where I memorized it, and you get it done and then you shut it down. They gave
Oh,
me 10 minutes. Well, no, I mean, they gave you 10 minutes to talk about it. And I would like to share a little story about the TEDx.
Yes.
So I am contacted by survivors, I am contacted by parents, I'm contacted by people who have caused harm on a daily basis. And I know that this is a silent epidemic. I know that it's a huge, huge problem. So I tried to go to the media and kind of sound the alarm and say, we need to be talking about this, but sibling sexual trauma does not bring in ratings. And, the reporters don't want to touch it. And they would say, either they didn't respond to my emails, didn't open my emails, or one reporter said, we've never talked about that before, but if we ever do, I'll reach out to you. And I'm thinking,
No.
so I was getting frustrated. So I thought, well, let me try TEDx. So I approached a coach and he said, well, you're not selling anything? I said, no. And he said, you don't have a book? And I said, no. And he said, okay, well, this is going to be a tough topic, but we'll give it a shot. And we were getting rejected. So we kind of changed it a little bit. We kind of changed my idea where you have to have an idea worth spreading. So I was going to have an idea worth spreading and I was going to sneak my story about sibling sexual abuse kind of through the back door. And
Oh,
when
you
I
little
applied,
rascal.
well, it worked in my favor because I had to put together a 4-minute video for TEDx Boca Raton, having no idea that TEDx Boca Raton is really hard to get into. I didn't know. I just like, okay, it's Florida. The theme is defining moments. Let's do that one. It sounds perfect for me. So I put together the video and I did sneak in sibling sexual abuse within that video. And the event organizers reached out to me and they said, thank you for your vulnerability. Because I realized that I'm better in video as opposed to on paper. So the video was worked in my favor. I am very approachable.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
great. And so they said, no disrespect, but we love your topic. We can't find any other talks about sibling sexual abuse and trauma. I said, no one's talking about it. And they said, but could you just not talk about all the other stuff, but could you just talk about sibling sexual abuse and make our audience a little uncomfortable? I said, I can do that. So
Jane.
yeah, I mean, we gotta I'm so grateful that they took a chance. They took a risk on my topic. And then when it was going to be published, TEDx, they needed all my studies. So I had to give them 3 pages of studies, thinking, oh my gosh, are they not going to post this? It was scary. I thought, oh no, this has to get out there. And it got out there. And um, my TEDx is really a little bit about my story, but it's also about the staggering statistics and it's about the impact. It's a whole family trauma that it impacts the parents, it impacts the child who is harmed, it impacts other children in the household, and it impacts the child who caused the harm. It's just a whole family trauma. And I end it with kind of begging the media to normalize talking about it and share survivor stories. So that's kind of my TEDx in a snippet. It's 13
Wow.
minutes long.
I'm so glad you got in through the back door.
Me too.
But look, here's a thought, and to our beautiful survivors actually watching and listening, please do look up Jane Epstein's TEDx. Where can they find that? Oh, I'll put it in the show notes below so they can click on the link.
Yeah, it's called Giving Sibling Sexual Abuse a Voice. Or is
Yeah,
it Giving Voice to Sibling Sexual
yeah,
Abuse?
I
No,
think it's giving voice.
I think
But
so.
yeah, okay, awesome.
I
We'll
should
put
know
that in
that.
the show. It's all right. You blocked it, remember? You memorized it. And I'm quietly sitting here impressed that you actually memorized 13 minutes of talking. I struggle with 2.
I probably rehearsed it about 200 times and I would walk around the neighborhood talking to myself. So my neighbors
Oh,
probably thought it was a little off.
that's okay. We all need different. So I guess I have a question for you, and maybe it hasn't been researched, but I'd be interested in your thoughts. As children, that it's sibling sexual abuse, and we'll get into 5 waves shortly. But I was interested in, once the child who did the abusing has grown older, is this something that does continue, or does it not. Do you have any idea or stats around? Yeah.
I can repeat what the experts have said.
Yes.
They have said that 95 to 98% of children who harm other children as a child with proper therapy and treatment do not go on to harm other adults or other children as an adult.
Okay.
Um, I have heard many stories. I know that my sibling did not go on to harm other children,
Okay.
and the research says that most of them do not. But there are those that do,
Okay.
especially if they don't get the help that they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say that I have had people who have caused harm reach out to me as, say, maybe 19 or 25, a little older. They reach out to me and they will tell me that they did not know, or they had been sexually abused themselves and they are acting out. Now, that does not excuse it. It explains it, does not excuse it. There are still consequences. But I know that they are looking at that child as an adult as well. And they say to me a lot of times, I did not know. And even my sibling has told me, I didn't know I was hurting you. When I realized I was hurting you, I stopped and I never did it again, which is why I believe in education. I think that the child who is harmed needs education so that they understand what's happening to them and they can go to a parent or a trusted adult. And the child who harms can, if we can educate them and say, you're entering puberty, you're at risk of harming another child and living with regret and doing something that has serious consequences. So I believe we just have to talk about it.
I think you're 100% right, and it's a nice little segue into 5 waves. So, as we mentioned before, Jane, you're one of the 5 co-founders of 5 waves. Can you tell us, please, a bit about the organisation, what it's doing out there?
Wow, 5 waves is a story in itself. Because I'm so vocal and I'm out there, I had a person reach out to me who said, look, I wrote this website and I need a survivor to look at it. And I'd just been accepted by TEDx. And I thought, okay, I'll look at it. And I started looking through it and I was like, oh my goodness, this is an amazing website. It's called siblingsexualtrauma.com, first website of its kind. I started looking over it and I said, I can't do this and TEDx, which is when I reached out to Maria Skoloff and said, would you like to help me look at this? And she said, yes. In the meantime, I'm also a moderator of a Facebook group for survivors of sexual abuse, not just sibling, but sexual abuse. One of 9 moderators. And parents are always trying to join the group. Well, we don't allow parents in the group. We only have survivors. So we kept having to turn these parents away. And I thought, I have to be able to send these parents somewhere. So I started finding Facebook groups for the parents. I found a Facebook group for parents of sibling sexual trauma and abuse. I tried to join because I want to know where I'm sending these parents. And one of the 5 waves first people, she was not 5 waves yet, but she politely said, no, you
Okay.
can't join because you're not a parent, you're a survivor. But I knew I had someone who was committed to making change. So I kept reaching out to this person and saying, hey, I'm on this podcast, or I got on this news story, oh no, or I got a TEDx. And she was always very polite. But when I finally reached out to her and said, by the way, a parent reached out to me, they've got this website, she said, I'm in. And within a week of that, I had another parent reach out to me who was going through a situation. And she said, I want to be an advocate. What can I do? And I said, well, we're working on this little website situation. So within a week, I had 3 parents and 2 survivors. Now, the 3 parents, they use pen names to protect their children, their families. And Maria and I are the very public survivors. So within a week, we came together, we shared our stories, and we created 5 waves. And we want to bring about awareness. We don't want any other person to feel alone, because when parents discover it in their home, they feel very alone. And then when we feel alone and no one's talking about it, then we allow it to continue. So actually, we just filed for a 501c3. So we're going to try and do that. We want to create waves of change and waves of awareness.
That's fantastic. Just for our audience, because I'm in New Zealand, we may not know what that form is. You filed a 501. What's that?
Oh, yes. So it'll be not for profit so that we
Oh,
can
okay.
start. I mean,
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
yeah.
We're starting out. So I don't even know if I should be telling that publicly, but
Oh,
it's out there now.
it's okay. We'll pretend we heard nothing. Well, I know nothing. But no, that's amazing because gosh, I'm sitting here thinking about how big this could be because you're trying to support parents, you're trying to support adult survivors of sibling sexual abuse. You're getting I know you don't like the word perpetrators, but the people that committed these acts on these younger siblings coming to you. You can see how big this could be, and I guess yeah, there's a lot there, and there's a lot of people who are really needing help and
Yes.
support. Jane, when you think about this, do you have like a kind of a goal in mind or an overall kind of view of how you would like to see if I gave you waved a magic wand, said, here you go, here it is. What is it? What
I
is
would
it?
like no survivor, no parent to feel alone. I would like us to talk about this like we do in other conversations. We tell our children to wear their bike helmet. We tell them to wear their seatbelt. We talk to them about stranger danger. We talk to them about body safety. Let's include siblings, step siblings, cousins, and older adolescents. Let's include that in our discussions. I want awareness and I want survivors to know that they are not alone because I still have survivors reach out to me and say, you are the first person I see talking about this.
Yeah,
Yet I've been out there for 5 years and I've been
yeah,
very, very lonely and
yeah,
I've heard a lot of no's.
yeah.
So coming together with Five Waves, I'm no longer alone and I don't want other survivors to feel alone.
No. And really so appreciate you coming on and talking about this. As you're talking as well, I realize that across the board, I call child sexual abuse a silent endemic, simply because people are so uncomfortable talking about it. And there's such, in my humble opinion, we don't talk about it because it's uncomfortable, which gives a free pass to the pedophiles to continue because everyone's too
Mhm.
uncomfortable. But the reality is, if a child can get up in the morning and go to school, surely the adults around the child can talk about what's happening. And I guess
They
I'm
deserve it. Our children deserve it.
Oh, we've got to keep them safe, surely. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, so I'm not trying to take it off sibling sexual abuse at all. I I,
No.
I guess I'm asking you, what do you see as we know, I guess similarities, differences for adult survivors, because some of us have experienced child sexual abuse and sibling sexual abuse. Some of us have only experienced sexual abuse from an adult in charge. Some of us have only experienced sibling sexual abuse. How do you see, if you've ever done any research or thought about this, how do you see those differences or
I think the main difference is when an adult sexually abuses a child, it's clear. You know that that person is a very bad person. When we're talking about a child harming another child, it gets, I use the word murky, but there are some cases when a child is raping another child, that's not murky at all. There's that, that line has been crossed. Um, but I think that there's a lot of confusion, I've heard from a lot of survivors of sibling and child on child who say, well, was it abuse or was it not abuse? Because the experts have these guidelines, but sometimes we don't fall into the guidelines. What we know we experienced abuse and trauma, yet it doesn't fit the guidelines because it was a younger child or the age difference. I always tell survivors, you know what you experienced. So I think that's the main difference. However, survivors of all forms of sexual abuse, we are all connected.
Yeah.
We all experienced shame. We
Yeah.
all had our voice taken from us. We are all connected by our stories.
Yeah.
And it's not us versus them or anything like that,
No.
because we all need each other. And I think that we need to hear each other's stories.
Yeah.
Every voice counts.
I'm so thrilled to hear you say that, because there's so many people who are just stranded out there and struggling to be heard. And I'm going to share with you the Darvo effect shortly, but I guess one of the things I just wanted to check in with you on was, it just came to me as you were speaking, Jane. You know how instinctively as small children we knew what was happening to us was wrong? Surely the child who is doing the abusing is instinctively aware of what they are doing is wrong. Surely. And you'll know if it's true because it was kept secret and it was kept
Hmm.
away from people.
Hmm.
So I guess, yeah, I can't believe,
Yeah.
yeah,
I would like to go back to something you said, that I don't like me, that
yeah,
I don't use the word perpetrator or abuser. And the reason is that a lot of the experts, when they're talking about children, they're talking about the child who's harmed and the child who harmed, because we are talking about children. And when we're talking about adult, they are a perpetrator. So there's more adult terms. I'm not in the head of someone who's sexually abused someone else. I have not done that. Um, but I think based on what I've heard, I do think that I would have to guess with you that there is some level of they know that it's wrong. And I also know that I've talked to my sibling and I asked them, why did this happen? Thinking that they would tell me that they were sexually abused, but no. They told me that it started out as curiosity. They were 12 and they decided to get me alone. That was not a good decision. um, they made that choice and they got me alone, and his body responded in a way that a 12-year-old's body would respond, and he knew he wanted more, and he would volunteer to babysit me. So sure, I think he knew it was wrong. um, but again, I'm not in his head.
no,
But
no,
I also think that with my particular sibling, um, very linear, very right from wrong. I think if he had been educated, and I think if I had been educated, I'd like to believe that maybe it wouldn't have happened, or
yeah,
maybe it wouldn't have gone on for so long. But we don't know. I
we
don't
don't
have.
know. Yeah. So I think it's what you've said earlier. I think it's so much around education, but we can't educate if people are uncomfortable to speak. And
Yes,
until that gets, that gets exploded, we've got
right.
more families struggling and suffering.
I've heard many survivors tell me, thank you for what you're doing,
Yeah.
but I will never come forward. It would
Yeah.
break my mother's heart if she knew she couldn't protect me, or I don't want to break the family apart. My family is all that I have. So I can't change the past. I can only continue to voice my concerns and get really, really loud, and hopefully we bring about awareness and prevent future generations. I understand if a survivor can't come forward. I This was not what I chose. I did not want this, but I kept getting the nudge to do it. And every time I spoke about it, I'd get at least one or two more messages from another survivor. And I thought, okay, someone's got to talk about it. And I have a husband who supports me, and I have a sibling who understands why I'm doing what I'm doing. And my mom understands why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it's my duty to speak up,
Well, I'm
not
so,
what I wanted to do.
no, and it's funny how you get shoulder tapped, isn't it, Jane?
Yes.
You've been shoulder tapped, and if you ignore that, they're going to throw a big rock at you. So,
Yes, I got a couple rocks thrown at me, definitely.
so I think I love this saying: if it's for you, it will find you.
Uh,
Uh, so yes, I know what you mean. It's and the whole thing is just incredible. I mean, no one really wants to talk about it, because it is so uncomfortable and hard. But I do know it took me till the beginning of this year before I could put it on LinkedIn. Reason? No one wants to know.
No one wants to
It's a
know.
professional platform, Jane.
Yes.
Really? Who works in these organisations? People. What percentage of people have suffered some form of child sexual abuse, sibling sexual abuse? Up to 1 in 3. There's a fair percentage of the workforce.
Right.
We've got to start owning that this is out there and the prevalence is huge.
It is huge. But I think we're making progress. I
Yeah,
really do. I think
yeah.
we're starting to open some doors.
And I think this sort of thing is really good because being able to talk about it, we're not normalizing what happens, we're normalizing a conversation around what happens.
Yes.
And you speaking out gives people permission to at least feel, oh, it's not just me.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are the plans for Five Waves? What are you guys working on for this next sort of 6-12 months, I guess?
Right now, I think we're just going to keep walking through the next open door. Which door opens, and we're going to go through it. And we obviously we could stay employed for many. I say employed, but we aren't earning an income. But we have so many things we want to do. We want to get into schools. We want to educate social workers. We want to bring about awareness. We want to support parents. We want to support survivors. We have a whole list of things we need to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there anything, Jane, that you would like to share with our fabulous survivors out there today that has helped you on your healing journey? What's some things that you were able to
Yes.
open to?
I believe in the power of writing. I believe in the power of journaling. I believe in the power of taking something inside of you and getting it down on paper and reorganizing it. And if you're being triggered, set a timer and then walk away from it. But sometimes if you just close your eyes and write, not write as though no one's going to look at it, you'll be amazed at how much you can get out, and you can look on the paper. If you're ready to read, you don't have to read it, but I think if you look back and you read it, you'll say, wow, I survived that. And I think that by sharing our stories, even if it's anonymously, I think every time you share your story, you shed one more layer of shame, and you might help someone else. And when you help someone else, that helps heal you. I believe in the power of stories. We're all connected by them.
That's fantastic. That it's kind of an act of service, really, isn't it? When you help someone, you help you. There's no greater gift, actually. I love
Yeah.
that. Is there any kind of last words you would like to share with the audience today? Anything that we perhaps haven't covered off that you would like to share? Words of wisdom, Jane.
I think my words of wisdom were to share your story, even if it's anonymously, or write it down, and know that you're not alone. When you understand the statistics, those statistics are real because those people are reaching out to us on siblingsexualtrauma.com and reaching out to me. It's real. You are not alone. And I understand. I understand if you can't come forward. I support you. And I support your journey.
Yeah. Jane, are you able to tell our audience, please, from what you've understood and researched, the percentage of sibling sexual abuse there is when people look at child sexual abuse? Are you able to give us that big percentage?
Yes, it is a big percentage. They say that when I talk about sibling sexual abuse, I talk about siblings, step siblings, cousins, and older adolescents. It is estimated that 40% of all child sexual abuse is perpetrated by juveniles. And those are the numbers that we know about. And even the experts are saying we think it's much, much higher, especially with pornography being so accessible and children being on lockdown for 2 years and people not coming forward and talking about it.
Yeah. Well, there'll be some audience who have experienced this, and we'll be very grateful you were on the show today. So thank you so much, Jane. I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to close out with our beautiful audience and come back to you. So, audience, wow, some pretty sobering insights and discussion there, and I hope you got as much from it as I did. A couple of things that Jane said really stood out. Well, there were more than a couple, but we can't go on forever. One was the finishing line, and I loved what Jane said about it's always moving. So I think that gives us permission, to not be too hard on ourselves, because as survivors we can be. And then the inner child and forgiving that beautiful little person inside of you, because we can sometimes carry the load and the blame when we shouldn't be. So until next time, fabulous ones, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you. Have a wonderful week, everybody.